Hello, and welcome to video 12, the final part of the High Score series. In this video, I'll be giving a brief rundown of some general conclusions I've made throughout the series, as well as drawing your attention to 3 other soundtracks which absolutely deserve your love. And who knows, I might even have some other surprises in store. What's the big idea? Video games, as we know them today, began appearing in the 60s and 70s, when storage constraints limited the complexity of soundtracks. Later, MIDI and CD-ROMs would make life much easier for composers, and soundtracks soon began to develop. There are lots of different compositional techniques that can be used to create certain moods or atmospheres. Sound effects can also be used to this effect. Why are these atmospheres so important? Well, games are 2D simulations of 3D environments, so they have to trick the player into thinking they're surrounded by their game. The easiest way to do this is with music and sound. The key difference between game soundtracks and film soundtracks is interactivity. The player's ability to make choices, both deliberate and otherwise, can cause music to change at any time. Transitions can also be required at different times, volumes, and locations. Sound and music can be used for lots of different purposes. They help players identify their surroundings based on motifs and recurring themes, and strengthen the player-avatar connection. This connection is particularly important as it gives players motivation to continue playing. It can also increase the emotional impact of the narrative. Cutscenes are often used to strengthen this bond, however their use has to be carefully balanced against the player's immersion within the game world. Sound effects can help make the avatar's actions more believable. Music and sound can be used to guide the player in such a way that doesn't distract from their immersion. This could be through surround sound or sound effects. Outside of the games themselves, music plays a big part in the industry's fanbase. Remixes and covers are increasingly popular, as are real-life and virtual concerts, which draw huge audiences from all around the world. So what broader conclusions might we draw from the series? Music is an important part of the player's gaming experience. It impacts their interpretation of the narrative, world, characters, and their own actions. Writing video game soundtracks provides new challenges for composers, such as limited storage capacities, interactivity within soundtracks, and accessibility concerns. But the reward, the impact mentioned previously, is much richer. And finally, the video game industry is constantly evolving. Virtual reality, concerts, mobile games, new consoles, there are so many diverse and exciting avenues for music lovers to go down. I rest my case. Of course, I didn't just ramble on about abstract theory for 11 videos, I also had my amazing case studies to analyse. What did we learn from them? Both Zelda titles use music to help the player identify their surroundings, but Breath of the Wild offers a much smoother transition between tracks. Ocarina of Time allows the player an element of control through the ocarina mechanic, something which isn't seen at all in its sequel. Irregular time signatures feature in both games. Ocarina of Time uses them to throw the player off balance during tricky boss fights, while Breath of the Wild does the opposite, a marching 5/4 beat, giving a sense of army-like uniformity within the final dungeon. Ocarina of Time's soundtrack could be considered as control-based. The player can change and travel the world around them, provided they have a solid understanding of its musical systems. Breath of the Wild's soundtrack, on the other hand, takes a much more atmosphere-driven approach, aiming to mimic the ambient sounds of exploration in the wilderness. Celeste, my second case study, uses music slightly differently. The game's soundtrack follows Madeline's emotions and mental states throughout the game. It also acts to encourage the player through tricky puzzles and platforming. Each of the game's characters have their own unique musical approach, helping players distinguish them. For example, Madeline is represented by the piano, while Granny is represented by the violin. The game creates huge contrast between the relaxing Madeline and Theo and the disturbing anxiety, driving home the impact of these attacks on Madeline. In fact, the whole soundtrack is designed to create a strong player-avatar relationship. In all three games, music is used to help the player identify something about their surroundings, whether it be a character, location, or narrative point. The player-avatar relationship is also evident in each, but particularly so in Celeste and Breath of the Wild. Honourable mentions. Unsurprisingly, there are quite a few games out there that didn't make it into this series. Indeed, even since I started preparing the first video, plenty of fantastic games have released, and more importantly, many amazing soundtracks have been brought to my attention. Here are 3 of my personal favourite soundtracks which didn't feature heavily in the series. The Rhythm Heaven series. My biggest regret is that I didn't get to speak at length about rhythm games. These titles have bright visuals and fun, simple minigames set to catchy music. If you're looking to see how addictive rhythm games can be, I'd recommend starting here. The Long Dark. This is one I stumbled onto almost by accident while writing my dissertation. It's a survival horror game that pits you against the wilderness. Like the idea of Breath of the Wild, but wish it and its soundtrack were a bit grittier, this game is perfect for you. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. It feels a bit like cheating having another Zelda title on here, but I couldn't not include my personal favourite game of all time. This huge orchestral soundtrack combines with the game's visuals and narrative to create, to me at least, a very, very special experience. Conclusion. That's just about everything we have time for today, but I do have one more surprise. Please take a look. I didn't feel I could pour my heart and soul into an essay on any other games. As for the titles I chose, I needed to make a Rhythm Games host a ha 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 ha. Next week, I'll be polishing off my crystal ball and looking into the future at where video game Video games played a huge part in my childhood. What is your problem? Some, but not all, of the Sonic that's not a word. For example, shut up. But this sort of approach won't work in an ordinary environment. But you... What the fuck? Using a slow play This only works if the player they are trying to represent... What? I don't understand. And do so in a way which does not break immersion. Video games. On the difficulty of the poor... Ah, that's how you want me to pronounce that. I see. Hands-on Volt... Download a free audiobook with your 30-day trial. A change to a more combative track can indicate the presence of enemies to the player. Combative. How do you pronounce combative? Combative. I was keen to shut up. To promote their Splatoon. We may not get on at the end of the differences between Video 11, Q&A. Is that something vibrated? Maybe it's my brain cells. By spending time in Animal Crossing, my second case study, Celeste, includes some options. Yeah, it includes some options. Game of the Year. Nintendo Switch has options. I won't... Music and sound can be used to guide the player in such a way that doesn't just... I've covered everything. Due to Breath of the Wild's huge map... Bless you. It's also possible... Is it? However, as my specialist oh my god, what a nightmare sentence. Cutscenes provide a the echoing vilophone. Oh god. Peripherals can provide an even stronger link. Provided that they use them for some very... Just stick to the script. Stop improvising. Stop adding your own words. These are your own words. Unfortunately, it didn't... No, you're right, it didn't. It won't work in a non-linear environment. What is wrong with you? Hidden in each... A cover. It can also be used to create brand new worlds for them to explore. With that, we really are done. No final surprises, just me signing off. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this adventure, whether you watched all 12 videos or just part of one. This project has been exactly the detox I needed from my dissertation, and if it's educated at least one person out there, then I'm happy. With that, one final thank you for watching, and I'll catch you later.
My sweet girl, and I see you right there smiling back at me too.